What are the best apps for playing Chinese chess? We're going to look at a bunch of options, and I'm going to tell you exactly the best ones for you to play, study, and immerse yourself in the ancient game of Xiangqi. When it comes to playing Xiangqi online, there are a few main categories of apps that we're going to look at. And which option is best for you kind of depends on what you're wanting to get out of the experience. So unlike other games like international chess, where the best app question is pretty clear, and it requires little introduction, usually it's going to be chess.com or Lichess, in Xiangqi, there's some special considerations that we need to take into account. And that's because for non-Chinese people like me, there are some technical, cultural, and sometimes even political barriers to playing on the top Xiangqi apps. Now, if you're wondering, what is the equivalent of chess.com in China? What's the main place where the masters play and all the amateurs kind of congregate as well? And there is a clear answer. It's unequivocally an app called Tiantian Xiangqi. By a wide margin, it's the most popular place to play Xiangqi online. They claim to have over 1 billion registered accounts. And the vast majority of all Xiangqi games in the world are played on that platform daily. And if you search for Xiangqi on any Chinese social media or video sharing sites, you're going to see the overwhelming majority of screenshots and video clips are from Tiantian Xiangqi and another app called JJ象棋, which we'll get to later. However, access to Tiantian Xiangqi requires a WeChat account. Now in China, WeChat is a so-called super app that's used for everything from social media access to paying for restaurant food to connecting with your medical records. But not everyone can actually access it, which means that access to the equivalent of chess.com in China can also be restricted for some people. For example, in 2020, the Indian government imposed restrictions on WeChat. It's not that China was refusing Indian citizens from using WeChat, it was the Indian government imposing that restriction on their own citizens. On top of the potential issues with accessing WeChat in the first place, China has implemented some pretty strict regulations surrounding online gaming behavior. And most games and most gaming companies in China are now required to use real name verification for their users, and that's often used for tracking the number of hours that people play, and even restricting people from playing online games over a weekly limit as required by law. Now, games deemed educational, like Xiangqi apps, are usually not subject to the weekly play restrictions, but real name verification is still usually required. So if you really want to play Xiangqi on some of the authentic apps like Tiantian Xiangqi, you absolutely have to enter the Chinese digital ecosystem. And you may have to upload your passport for real name verification, fill out some forms, wait for review and approval. It can be a big hassle. Now, I have made some tutorial videos that walk you through that process. It's not as bad as it sounds, but it still is a barrier nonetheless. So that's the first major barrier. The second major barrier is a language barrier. Even if you do enter the Chinese digital ecosystem and start using the authentic Xiangqi apps, none of them have multilingual options. Every single one is going to be in Chinese only. So if you don't understand Chinese, you're going to have to awkwardly navigate the app, taking screenshots, putting it into your Translate app on the phone. It can be time-consuming and a little frustrating at times. Now, if you're just curious about Xiangqi and peeking your nose into this world, those barriers alone might be enough to make you walk away and say, forget it. But don't worry, by the end of this video, you'll know exactly where to start and why. So given the barriers, I've broken this down into 3 categories of apps. The first is the authentic Chinese apps. These are the ones that are the hardest to access, but they might also be the most rewarding, and they're certainly the most authentic, culturally rich expressions of Xiangqi. The second category is apps that are readily available outside of the Chinese ecosystem, but there might still be the language barrier. Maybe the app is still in Chinese, or maybe it's in Vietnamese, but it's something that you can readily access. And then lastly, we'll look at the apps that have essentially no barrier to entry for foreigners, no installation requirements, multilingual options, and that all sounds promising, but there are some interesting issues that we'll discuss. So without further ado, let's get started looking at the authentic Chinese apps that require a WeChat account. So if you're willing and able to get a WeChat account and go through the real name verification process, then the field of options is wide open for you. You can explore everything that Xiangqi has to offer. So I have open right now the WeChat mini programs panel, and I just searched for Xiangqi. And there's a lot of options here. But in particular, the most popular apps for Xiangqi are undoubtedly Tiantian Xiangqi and JJ Xiangqi. There's a few runners-up that also claim to have millions of active users, but if you enter the Chinese digital ecosystem and get access to this, then I'll let you just explore everything to your heart's content. But for the purposes of this review, we really want to take a look at Tiantian Xiangqi and JJ Xiangqi because everything else has to be compared to those two. Okay, so here's Tiantian Xiangqi, and the first thing to notice is they're usually pretty elaborate about their reward system. They've got a lot of in-app currency. All of the top authentic Chinese apps are this way. So we'll just go ahead and exit out of that. So on this main page, this is where you choose to play Xiangqi, and there's lots of different options. They have all sorts of events going on, like this one where you can earn a certificate. I did actually do that recently. I did some of their tournaments, and I ordered the certificate from Tiantian Xiangqi, and it's got my name there as well as the title and performance. So they've got all sorts of events and different activities that you can do in the app. Well, let's go ahead and exit out of that. So Tiantian Xiangqi has a very robust puzzle system. It's one of the best that I've seen. In particular, you can choose between different categories of puzzles. So we've got checkmates here. You can do mate in 1, mate in 2, 3, octagonal horse. Every basic category of checkmate or basic kill is included. And the same thing for middle game tactics. You can choose from a variety of different tactics and practice just that tactic alone. They also have this nice puzzle map, very beautiful artwork, and this has inspired countless apps that's come after it. This is almost a standard in Xiangqi apps to have a puzzle map that looks just like this. And as you work your way along the map, completing different levels, you earn rewards by unlocking these treasure chests. Now, of course, playing Xiangqi is the main feature, and they have what's known as the chess performance evaluation, and this is where you play rated games against other players. When you start a game, the rated games are 15 minutes with 90 seconds per move. The first 3 moves, you get 30 seconds per move. You can watch active games between top players, so very similar to the TV system or other broadcast systems in Lichess and chess.com. Of course, you can play against a bot and choose different levels. Back to the home page, they also have a variant of Xiangqi known as dark chess or flip chess. And this is where the pieces start face down and they're shuffled, and it's a very popular variant of Xiangqi. Tiantian Xiangqi also has a very robust learning system. So they have a couple different in-app courses, and this is the one that I went through in my How to Play Xiangqi video, the very first video of my Fundamentals of Xiangqi course on YouTube. This other course goes through some more advanced material, and I'm currently working through that, making videos along the way. So if you're interested in seeing this content translated to English, of course, go ahead and check out my Fundamentals of Xiangqi playlist on YouTube. So they have pretty much everything you could ask for. They've got the master openings. You can see they have in their database 71,000 games that have started with C2 equals 5, the central canon opening, obviously the most popular opening. And you can look through the typical responses and see what the win rate is for red or black, or whether it's a draw. You can also use the analysis board and set up positions and interact with the engine and study Xiangqi that way. All very standard for people coming from chess.com background. Something unique to Xiangqi is the concept of ancient manuals. And these are old books. There's usually about 13 of them that have been sort of codified into this canon of the ancient manuals. And they contain a bunch of famous games. So Tiantian Xiangqi has these games in here. They also have commentary associated with some of the moves. And you can go through that and read the commentary for the move and try and understand what's going on. They also have forums and blogs and video libraries and training materials. Of course, it's all in Chinese, so again, back to the barriers of entry for foreigners. And then they have a huge emphasis. This is common to all of the top Xiangqi apps in China, a huge emphasis on themes and board skins and pieces. There are a lot of in-app items that you can get and earn, and you trade those for different boards and pieces. These all have a very distinct Chinese style. You've got a plum blossom theme, themes from Chinese mythology, martial arts and ink paintings. Basically every motif from Chinese art, history, culture, and mythology is all represented. Every year they release a board that's themed for the particular year. So this was released for the year of the snake. You've got this snake theme. This one was released for the year of the horse, and it's got a horse theme with horse animations. Lots of different pieces to choose from and earn or collect. A lot of times you don't get the full set immediately. You kind of have to keep playing games, keep earning rewards as you sort of collect the pieces along the way. And people seem to like to collect different profile frames and badges for their profiles. Overall, it's a very flamboyant atmosphere. There's a lot going on in this app. There's a reason why this is the most popular place to play. If you like different themes and artwork, then this app is going to be for you. If you're interested in a little more of the serious study, like the openings and using the analysis engine or studying the ancient manuals, this app is also for you. And then, of course, everybody's playing on this. With over 1 billion active users at any given time, you're going to see probably 250,000 people playing at least. So you're always going to get matched. You're not getting matched with bots unless it's somebody that's cheating using software. But it's not like the app developers have inserted bots into the playing field like you'll see in some of the other apps. So this is my favorite place to play. I love Tiantian Xiangqi. I've made multiple videos explaining how to use the app, how to navigate it, and of course, how to install it and go through the real name verification and all of that. So this is the gold standard, essentially the definition of online Xiangqi. Probably between this and JJ象棋, which we'll look at next, that's probably going to represent more than 80% of all online games played daily. So this is the experience for the vast majority of Xiangqi players. Now, Tiantian Xiangqi feels like a little bit more of a serious place to play. Yes, they have a lot of fun activities and different theme options, but they really emphasize the learning with the huge video library and courses, analysis engine, ancient manuals. I mean, they are the place to be if you want to learn from an authentic location. In contrast, JJ象棋is much more of a video game. So everything about JJ Xiangqi is stylized like a video game. It does have some of the serious elements too, but it's much more of a game, and that's the focus here. So we can see that even in this front page here. In this lobby, we have this kind of cool 3D environment. We can go look at the puzzles. They have a lot of different options to choose from. The battlefield is definitely styled a lot more like a video game. It just feels like this is more of a fun place to play. But they do have a lot of learning materials. In fact, they have multiple courses, and you can learn checkmate or basic kills. You can look at endgames, tactics, opening theory, and there's a lot of material here that you could go through and study. And overall, it's a very high graphic design. The animations are exciting. When you checkmate someone, you get these big, huge effects. It's just a lot of fun. Now, just like Tiantian Xiangqi, the main options for playing games includes the chess performance evaluation. Just like Tiantian Xiangqi, this uses exactly the same time controls, 15 minutes with limited time per move. But you can also play against a bot, and you can play in their different tournament series and things like that. All of it's pretty much organized exactly the same way as Tiantian. Now, there's maybe not as many players here. We see right now there's less than 6,000 players in the performance evaluation field. Now, granted, it is the middle of the night in China, so there's not as many people going to be logged in and playing. But as I mentioned, there is a wide margin between Tiantian Xiangqi and everything else in terms of the number of players and how popular it is. But as you play games, you increase your rating and you kind of work your way up this map, stepstones trying to get to the next highest rating. It's overall, it's just a very fun design. Just like Tiantian, and I'll say it again, and also like all of the other authentic main Chinese chess apps, there's a huge emphasis on themes and designs and board pieces and animations, and JJ leans into that heavily. They've got all sorts of options to choose from, or things to purchase or earn. Lots of very fantastic, whimsical, fun designs. So if you like modern video games and you want your chess experience to feel like a modern video game, then JJ Xiangqi might be for you. Now let's look at the second category of apps, and this is where the apps are available outside of the Chinese digital ecosystem. So you can get them on Google Play for Android or the Apple App Store, but maybe there's still that other barrier, the language barrier. So first off, if you search for Chinese chess or Xiangqi in the Google Play Store, you'll see quite a few options, and most of them are not relevant for our discussion today. So we're specifically looking for where's the best place to play online, to play real games with other players. And a lot of these apps are just offline only. So for example, this one only lets you do a single player. The 2-player option is where you take the phone, and you set it across the table and it's you and somebody else. My daughter and I played on this app for several years. Anytime we would go to a restaurant and we were just waiting for our food, I'd take this app out and we would just have a 2-player in-person game. And there's a lot of apps like that. So in this category, there are really only 2 sets of options. The first is really its own category, and that's the Vietnamese apps. So Chinese chess is very popular in Vietnam. And not all of those apps are going to show up in the Google Play Store or the Apple App Store if you just type in Xiangqi or Chinese chess. You might also need to expand your search and use the Vietnamese word for Chinese chess. And that'll bring up a few other options that you can explore. So for example, this one has more than 1 million downloads. So a lot of these are very popular. They have a large player base, and a lot of them have more than 1 million downloads. In fact, if we'll take a look at a couple of them here, yep, more than 1 million downloads. Here's another one, 500,000 downloads. This one has 100,000 downloads. So let's just take a quick look at this first option. So here's one of the Vietnamese apps, and as is the point of this whole category, the app is available to download without the need for a WeChat account, but the app doesn't have any multilingual options. Now, in this case, that's probably not that big of a deal. There aren't very many buttons here. You can play Xiangqi, you can play the flip chess, you can watch some active games that are going on. But that's about it. This is not a very complicated app. It doesn't have a lot of learning materials. It doesn't have an analysis board or engine for us to work with. But there are a lot of options to choose from in the Vietnamese world of Xiangqi. So that's one category of apps that you can go explore. It's maybe not my favorite personally. If you happen to find a really good one that seems like it fits all the criteria that we're going to talk about at the end of this video, then go ahead and drop it in the comment section below so other people can find it. But that'll give you just a little bit of a taste of what some of the options are like. So in this category, we have a lot of Vietnamese apps on the one hand, but on the other, we have just one app that I want to point out. And that's this one that's just called Chinese Chess by HDuo Fun Games. This is in the Google Play Store. In the Apple App Store, it's just called Xiangqi trademark. I don't know if they actually trademarked that. Can they trademark that? But anyway, so this is an interesting app, and it's kind of a standout in this category. So on the Google Play Store, it has 4.1 stars with 1 million downloads. On the Apple App Store, it's 4.7 star rating. Not sure how many downloads it has, but still it seems like a pretty popular choice. So let's get this loaded up. Okay, so I just loaded up the app, and a lot like Tiantian Xiangqi, you have a lot of these rewards and pop-ups, in-app currency, all of that, all very much like the authentic Chinese chess apps. So at the top here, we can play Xiangqi, and just like all of the authentic apps, there's that chess performance evaluation field. Time controls are exactly the same as Tiantian Xiangqi. And I will say from my experience, this app does pair you with the real players, at least at the lower levels. I'm not sure about some of the higher levels if some people are cheating or something. But unlike some of the other apps on the Google Play Store where you think you might be getting paired with a real player, and then it is absolutely a bot that you're playing with, and you can tell it's not that fun. But no, this one does seem to be pretty authentic. Again, this is the category of apps that there is a language barrier. There is no option to translate this into your native language. You just have to navigate through the Chinese if you don't understand the Chinese. So this has most of the main major features that you find in Tiantian Xiangqi or JJ Xiangqi. You can play with the bots. They have multiple different puzzle sections that you can choose from, and you can work your way through their puzzles and try and figure out this end game. In this case, it's just a white-faced general, pretty standard. They have some other learning material here. They have stuff about what the pieces are and how they move, all fairly standard information. Of course, all the instructions are written in Chinese. They've got at least one ancient manual here. I think this is the Plum Blossom Manual. And you can walk through it and, see what those moves are and study it and figure out why a particular move was played. There's some commentary here, just like we saw in Tiantian Xiangqi. Not as many options, though. There's only this one manual as opposed to the 13. They're standard elsewhere. And there's some training material on endgames, and this is, not very much material, but maybe enough to get you started and to sort of have that authentic experience. And like all the other authentic Chinese chess apps, you can play the variants like Reveal Chess and Dark Chess. They do also have an analysis board. It's maybe not as advanced or in-depth of calculations as what you might expect from Tiantian Xiangqi or Xiangqi.com or Pikafish. But if you're just starting out, none of that actually matters, and this is definitely probably going to be sufficient for initial explorations. Now, just like all of the other authentic apps, there is also that emphasis on the themes, the boards and pieces. You can collect the in-app currency and use these for a limited time or pay for it. And I would say that this app is probably 60% of the full Tiantian Xiangqi experience. Maybe 70%, depending on what you're talking about. It has all of the main categories. It's just not as much content, not as much learning content, not as wide of a variety of themes. It doesn't have the openings database. It doesn't have some of those more academic features. But otherwise, this is pretty much an authentic expression of Xiangqi. Now, they do seem to have quite a few players on here. Normally, at peak hours, I see something close to 150,000 players on there. I am a little bit suspicious that those numbers are kind of inflated because even during those peak hours, usually Tiantian Xiangqi itself has 250,000, and this seems like quite a bit. So there's a part of me that wonders if they inflate their numbers a little bit. However, it could be true, and here's why I think that might be the case. If we go back to WeChat and search for Xiangqi in the mini programs panel, the very first result is this one, which just says Xiangqi. And lo and behold, it is the exact same app. So I've got these running simultaneously. On the left is the one from Google Play. This is the Android version. And then on the right is the WeChat mini programs version. This app, even though it's available on the Google Play Store, is an authentic Chinese app that is available in WeChat. Now, I don't know why the other apps like, say, JJ Xiangqi, they're available on the Apple App Store, but when you try to go log in, you need the real name verification and all of that. I'm not exactly sure how they've coordinated it with this app. So the external world doesn't have any of those barriers. So anyway, if you're willing to navigate an app that's entirely in Chinese, this might be a good option for you. So that brings us to our third category of Chinese chess apps, and that's the apps that have multilingual options. You could translate it into English and other languages, and there's no WeChat account required. Now, in this category, there's really only one option, and you probably already know what it is. It's Xiangqi.com. Again, most of the other apps that are available on the Google Play Store or Apple App Store, a lot of these are just single-player apps and don't have the player-to-player online play. Xiangqi.com does, and they really stand out in terms of features. So with a 4.7 rating and 100,000 downloads on Google Play, this is already off to a strong start. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. So here we're logged into their interface, and they have all the features that you could ever ask for. So you can play online and you'll get matched with real opponents. Right now there's 1,700 players online, and this seems pretty consistent, about 100,000 games played on this site per day. We have a couple different time controls to choose from. You can also play a bot, and they have multiple different levels here. They've got Meow for level 1, and this one's even easy enough that I can beat it. So that's fun. You can also watch in-progress games. So for example, take a look at this one. Very rich feature set, and I think that's definitely the strength of Xiangqi.com. They have just about every feature you could ever ask for. They do have occasional tournaments. I'm not sure how to join these. I've never tried this before. But they also have puzzles, and you can choose between checkmate and tactic. This is maybe a weaker section of the site. Like I showed you on Tiantian Xiangqi, there was maybe 50 different categories between checkmate and tactic. So here you're just going to get a mixture. If we go over to learn and then lessons, they have a fair amount of material, starting with how the pieces move and some of the fundamentals, and then moving into some of the different basic kills and tactics. They're just now starting to add material in the advanced category, so we've got the intro to book openings. And a lot of this pretty much parallels in terms of organization the content that you see in Tiantian Xiangqi as far as their in-app courses, and pretty much the same material as what's in my Fundamentals of Xiangqi course. In addition to the lessons, you can also pull up the analysis board. And unlike a lot of the other Xiangqi apps, they have this nice move list on the right that is basically the same as what chess.com does. So you can navigate through your analysis. They have a basic game database, which has a bunch of master or grandmaster level games that you can browse through, all laid out very nicely. This is a pretty nice system. And they have some social features like chat room and clubs. All very nice, very feature rich. And as far as features goes, and barriers especially, Xiangqi.com has got to be the top choice. They have the full game review feature that you've seen in chess.com. Tiantian Xiangqi also has something similar, not broken down into as many steps. But compared to most of the other apps that we've looked at, this is by far the most feature-rich, most comprehensive, and probably one of the most functional and useful Chinese chess apps out there, even rivaling or doing better than some of the top apps in China. Specifically, say, with the analysis and how this is all laid out with the move list and all of that. This, in my opinion, is superior. Now, I've had quite a few messages from people asking, what's the best place to play and which app should I download? And I usually say, the easiest place to start is just go to Xiangqi.com, and that's going to get you started. However, I don't always feel good about that. Yes, it's the easiest place to get started. It's easy for them because they don't have to translate, they don't have to install WeChat, etc. It's easy for me because I don't have to explain, go click on this button, go download this, and here's how you get logged in. Overall, it's just easy. But it's taken me a while to figure out what exactly is the problem with Xiangqi.com that I don't feel great about. And I finally figured it out. So here's why I don't always feel good about recommending Xiangqi.com. The reason is because its design is modeled after chess.com. Now, if you don't believe me, let me show you. So here I have chess.com on the left and Xiangqi.com on the right. On the left navigation bar at the top, we have the site logo for both, followed by this play icon. And if you zoom in, you can see that they're pretty much the same icon. One is a hand grabbing a chess piece, and the other is a hand, I guess, hovering over a Xiangqi board. This is again followed by puzzles on both, learning, lessons, and then the social stuff. And down at the bottom, you've got profile and settings and notifications. Okay, so not coincidental. I mean, this was obviously by design. The content of these menus is pretty much exactly the same, organized exactly the same way. If you load up a game and look at the game review, you see it's organized exactly the same way. The right-hand panel has this graph and these categorizations for different types of moves, brilliant, great, book, and so forth. At the bottom, you can start the review for both sites. This is all exactly the same. You notice that the graph moves down to the bottom for chess.com, same for Xiangqi.com. move lists with icons indicating what type of move it is. Literally everything about the two sites is pretty much exactly the same. And so, this is obviously not a coincidence. This is by design. Xiangqi.com chose this strategy to make a version of chess.com that plays Xiangqi. Now, this doesn't seem like it would be a problem. And why does it bother me? Well, it's going to make even less sense after what I say next, which is I think that chess.com is actually a superior design over Tiantian Xiangqi and the other top apps in China. In my opinion, as far as the features go, as far as the user interface and the world-class modern design and engineering behind the enterprise-level chess.com system, I think that chess.com is at least 20% better than Tiantian Xiangqi, probably across the board in terms of all their features and the engineering design. Chess.com has all the same features as Tiantian Xiangqi, but even more than that. They have a whole system for coaches where a coach can set up a classroom and students can log into it, and a bunch of different features that Tiantian Xiangqi doesn't even have. Tiantian Xiangqi is also designed primarily as a mobile-first application. They pretty much don't offer any sort of widescreen version. The only option they do have is in the WeChat mini program version of Tiantian Xiangqi. You can make it a widescreen, but it's a little clumsy. So I think Tiantian Xiangqi is a little bit dated in terms of some of their designs and ways of doing things, and chess.com is absolutely cutting edge, state of the art. There's probably very few, if any, other gaming websites that even come close to the stellar design of chess.com. So why in the world would I be saying that it's a problem that Xiangqi.com is modeling their design after chess.com? So I finally figured out the problem, and here it is. I've spent the past year and a half fully immersing myself in the world of authentic Chinese Xiangqi apps, like Tiantian Xiangqi and JJ象棋, and I've looked at a whole bunch of the other apps from mainland China. And among all of the top apps, there's this remarkable consistency in how Xiangqi is presented. And I've identified 11 little details that I think form what I would call the online culture of Xiangqi today. Now, before we look at these details, I just want to clarify, none of these details on their own matter. This is a cumulative effect. So the first detail is background music, and I have it turned off now for the purposes of making videos. But every single one of the top Xiangqi apps in China uses some sort of a traditional Guzheng background track. This is ubiquitous. Every single one of the apps has a background track that is, similar in style in terms of a traditional Chinese folk music. And they all have it turned on by default. This is not just a incidental feature that people don't know about or they have to go turn it on. Every single one has this on by default. The next detail is, and again, this is across every single one of the main Xiangqi apps, they have spoken sound effects for capture, check, and checkmate. If you put your opponent in check, you get this sound effect. And also mention, because this is part of it, those onboard animations, I'll play it again. This animation right here, that type of animation for checks, captures, and checkmates is absolutely part of this Xiangqi culture. So background music, the spoken sound effects, and the capture, check, checkmate animations. Now, also common across all of these apps is sort of a certain look and feel. Like there's this default idea of what an online Xiangqi board should look like and what the pieces should look like. And they almost all look pretty much exactly like this. You've got this sort of beechwood board, approximately this color. The pieces are all rounded 3D like this and kind of look like they have some thickness to them. Every single one of the top Xiangqi apps in China looks pretty much like this. There's some variation. They all use the drop shadows. This is pretty much the standard design. And on that topic, they also have a very standard and specific way of animating how their pieces move. So in chess, the pieces slide across the board. That's how they're standardly animated in chess.com and Lichess. In Xiangqi, the pieces always go through this sequence. When you select the piece, it lifts off the board in this like 3D effect and tilts forward. And then in that sort of lifted effect, and you can even see the drop shadow has expanded, giving that sort of effect as if it's lifted. It flies across the board and then lands back down. This is not just an animation feature of Tiantian Xiangqi. This is pretty much the standard way that all of the top apps animate how Xiangqi pieces move. And in fact, I think that it's related to a particular behavior in some of Xiangqi culture. So in China, there's this cultural behavior when playing Xiangqi with, say, friends and relatives, not over the board tournaments, that's for sure, of picking up your pieces and violently slamming them down on your opponent's pieces. So it becomes this like very loud, flamboyant game. And I think that's what we see here. We see a little bit of that picking up the piece and then moving it across the board. In chess, it's more common to slide the pieces across the board. We see that encapsulated in the chess.com method of doing things. Now, as I already went through in great depth, in all, I'm not exaggerating here, all of the top Xiangqi apps, the board skins and piece themes, there's a huge emphasis on this. There are usually lots of choices to choose from, and as I pointed out before, most of the choices are related to various aspects of Chinese mythology or Chinese art and aesthetics in general. Another common theme, again, across all of the top Xiangqi apps, is that they almost always present Xiangqi and flip chess. So you can play a standard Xiangqi game, but then this flip or dark chess is always presented as a optional variant, and it is very popular. Now, another standard feature, again, of all the top apps is how the ratings are calculated. So they don't use exactly an ELO system. It's kind of like an ELO, but it's not. So the way the ratings work is they don't put forward a number and say like, oh, I'm, 1600 ELO. That's very much a chess thing. In Xiangqi, at least on the online Xiangqi, the ratings are always from these numbered titles. And so we've got this Chinese character, which essentially means student. So student level 3-2, and then you move up to amateur level 1-1 and kind of progress. And the associated ratings or ratings range for that title is given on the right. So as you work your way up, eventually you get to this professional level, and that's when you have some really high ratings. So it's a little bit different system. It's not the same as the ELO system in chess. Back to the puzzles, and I already showed this earlier, but this puzzle map design is common across so many of the Chinese chess apps in China. There might be some slight differences in how things are drawn, but it's almost always this winding path through some different landscapes with some different Chinese architecture along the way, and treasure chests. Usually milestones are denoted with these flags. So again, a small detail, but it's common across all of the main Chinese chess apps. The last two features that we'll look at are the ancient manuals, and as I already mentioned, I think this is kind of unique to Chinese chess, unique to Xiangqi. So this idea of having this sort of a canon of ancient collections of games that everyone kind of studies and learns and knows is sort of a common symbolic base. This is definitely something that's unique to Xiangqi culture that is, maybe different than chess. And the last detail that I've identified in Xiangqi culture, or online Xiangqi culture, as I'm defining it, is the standard time controls. So a standard rated game in Xiangqi in all the top apps is this chess performance evaluation. And it's always 15-minute games, and they use time limits per move. So this is a system that is unique to Xiangqi in terms of how widespread it is, how consistent it is for the top Xiangqi apps. Now, if you tell me, okay, none of these details are really that important, okay, so why are you complaining about it? I'll grant you that. None of these details are particularly important on their own. You could dissect whether the chess.com version is better than the Xiangqi version, but taken together, these create a cumulative effect, a complete look, feel, and play mechanics package that is unique to Xiangqi, and it's been curated by Chinese culture, and it's enjoyed by millions of players daily. So keep in mind that chess and Xiangqi have both evolved separately independently. Xiangqi has been in relative isolation from chess influences. So they've developed all of these little ways of doing things that are different, than what you see in chess.com or Lichess. And here's the problem with Xiangqi.com. By copying chess.com, they've copied every way of doing things from chess, and specifically chess.com, not from authentic Chinese chess sources. In fact, not a single element of the 11 characteristics that I described are present in Xiangqi.com. This thing has been so culturally sterilized, almost clinically so, that if it weren't for the fact that there were Chinese chess pieces on the board, you wouldn't be able to tell that this is a Chinese-related game or site at all. I mean, I guess the only thing that might be the case is they've got kind of the, Chinese mountains and, I don't know, maybe these horses and figures in the foreground. That's about it. Now, for the game nerds who only care about game mechanics and how the pieces move and doing the analysis and things like that, Xiangqi.com, perfect. I mean, it has every feature you can possibly need. But I think it's a mistake for the broader audience, or maybe for people who are just peeking their nose into this world. There's something missing here. And I think the mistake is assuming that people are only interested in the mechanics. People are not interested in the full Chinese experience and all of the cultural trappings that come along with that. So here's a relevant example. So back in 2010, there was a publisher who decided to rewrite Enid Blyton's famous 5 books after some market research that suggested that contemporary children couldn't really handle some of the older English words, and maybe they needed to modernize it a little bit, replacing some of the dated British vocabulary like mother and father with mum and dad. Awful swatter became bookworm. Pullovers became jumpers, so they just sort of updated it. And this seems like a reasonable thing to do. However, they had to abandon the project after publication because it didn't work. By removing some of the dated vocabulary, the books which were set in that time period now no longer felt legitimate. They didn't feel like they were authentic. So on paper, it seemed like a good idea. You're actually removing some of the friction. You're removing some of the difficulty and tailoring the product to your audience. But there are some cases where adaptation like that removes the thing that people cared about. So in that example, sort of a cultural adaptation removed some of the flavor, which was one of the reasons why people are interested in the first place. And after abandoning the modern updated editions and returning back to selling the old versions, their sales continue to sell more than 500,000 annually of the original books. So I think what's happened here is Xiangqi.com made this, obviously conscious decision to model themselves after chess.com. And it seems like it would make sense. You're trying to bring Chinese chess out into the non-Chinese world, so might as well adapt it, might as well make it look familiar, make it work exactly the same way as something that people are already familiar with. And for some people, that's fine. In fact, obviously, they have a good player base, the 100,000 games a day. And I think it's probably a combination of the fact that they own the Xiangqi.com domain, and there is obviously value in implementing the features that are on chess.com. It's obviously a world-class system. And as far as chess games go, yes, you want all of these features. These are the features that you really want, especially if you're going to be a serious player. However, I'm not sure if they asked the question, why are people actually interested in Xiangqi? Now, I'm sure there's lots of reasons. Like I said, some people are interested in the game mechanics. Like, this game has a cannon, and that introduces lots of interesting dynamics. But I think that's a subset of the possible people who are interested. I think that there are also people who are interested in Chinese culture, and so they want to learn about this game because Xiangqi is one of the 4 arts. This is not just some off to the side part of culture. Xiangqi has been brought, kind of front and center in many ways, and it's so ubiquitous, and there are idioms that surround the game and in the Chinese language. And so I think that there are probably some people who are interested in Xiangqi because of the cultural aspects. And again, when I look at Xiangqi.com, why I don't feel super great about recommending it to people all the time is because I'm not sure what they're looking for. Are they looking for just the game mechanics? Okay, great. Xiangqi.com, 100%. But if they're just interested in Xiangqi because of more of the cultural aspects, and sometimes I think people can look at Xiangqi, maybe from a foreign perspective. Maybe this was my perspective when I first encountered the game. You kind of look at it and it feels like it's this exotic, foreign, very interesting game. And Xiangqi.com strips all of the intrigue away and just leaves you with a chess.com clone that happens to be Xiangqi instead of chess. So what I worry is when I recommend Xiangqi.com to people is that some of them are going to maybe download the app and they play it for a little bit, but it's not really that interesting, so they just forget about it, and it just never really captures their interest. And probably the reason why I worry about that is because that is literally my experience with Xiangqi.com. So I first encountered Xiangqi maybe about 10 years ago. I was visiting a friend in Hong Kong and we were going through the ladies market and I saw a Chinese chess set. And I asked my friend, what is that? I've never seen anything like that before. And he was like, oh, that's our chess. That's Chinese chess. And I was just so intrigued. And so I bought the set and we took it to a park and he taught me how to play. And there was just something about the game that really intrigued me, especially I was already interested in Chinese culture. So when I got home, I took the set and I taught myself the characters. Now, the biggest problem for me was I didn't really have any social network where I'm at. There aren't any Xiangqi clubs, so I didn't really have anyone to play with and learn. Now, because I didn't really have a good way to learn Xiangqi or engage with it socially, I kind of just set it aside for many years. And after Xiangqi.com came out, I downloaded the app and looked at the website, and I don't know, it just didn't really intrigue me. Didn't really capture my imagination for some reason. And maybe now I kind of understand why. But I was always still interested in Xiangqi and finally decided, hey, I'm going to go check out some of the authentic apps. And that's when things changed for me. As soon as I got engaged on the Tiantian Xiangqi platform, all of a sudden, I felt like this game came alive. There was just something about it. And again, it's not any one of these details. It's not the piece animations alone. It's not the spoken sound effects. It's not the variations. It's all of these little details in combination produce this overall effect that makes it very intriguing. And I think this is one of the big points of interest for a lot of people who are seeking Xiangqi. So that's what I worry when somebody asks me, which app should I play on? And, I just go the easy route and just say, yeah, Xiangqi.com, probably the easiest place to start. I worry that the fact that it is so culturally sterilized, so absent of almost any hint of Chinese culture, I worry that they're going to have a similar experience as me. And they play it for a little bit, it doesn't really capture their interest, and the games get set aside. Now, recently, in the past few weeks of making this video, Xiangqi.com has started releasing some additional themes. I think this is an excellent step in the right direction. They previously just had this simple theme, which is as boring as you can possibly get. Does not look at all like authentic Xiangqi. Yeah, maybe it looks like something you would see in an old printed Xiangqi manual or textbook, but this is not something that you would see being played in online Xiangqi in China. And even here, their wooden theme, it's just not quite right. The pieces have these solid red and black colors. Of course, everything else about Xiangqi.com is modeled after chess.com, so of course, the piece animations, they slide instead of being lifted and landing. Xiangqi.com does not offer a flip chess or dark chess option. And even the themes that they are starting to add, which again, I'm really glad that they're doing this, even these themes are not quite right. They don't feel aligned with the Xiangqi vision of what a theme looks like. So for example, we've got this World War II theme. This is kind of cool, but I have never seen in any of the Xiangqi apps a war-based theme. Maybe there's some political or social or philosophical reasons why they would never choose something like that. But this feels wrong, incorrect. And on top of that, this is World War II, the way this background is designed doesn't look like it has anything to do with China's involvement in World War II, which they were involved. And if you look at pictures of their involvement, this is not going to give you a picture of what that looked like and what they were involved in. So this is definitely not bringing the Chinese perspective to the Xiangqi.com users. This is taking what I suspect they believe are the perspectives of the Xiangqi.com users and projecting that onto Xiangqi itself. Now, like I said, I think the themes are still moving in the right direction. before they made these premium only, I'll just tell you a quick story. So my daughter's had Xiangqi.com installed on her tablet, and she's also had a few other Chinese chess ones that are a little more on the authentic side of things. And maybe a few months ago, just out of curiosity, because I was thinking about this video, I asked her if she ever used the Xiangqi.com app. And she looked at me and she's like, no, that one is so weird. Well, after they started releasing these themes and, I was kind of playing around with it, she walked by me one time and I was using this neon theme. And she was like, whoa, what is that? And I told her, oh yeah, Xiangqi.com, they just released some new themes. Well, shortly after, I noticed her playing Xiangqi.com and she was using this neon theme and she seemed like she was really interested in it. She used it multiple times. Now it's unfortunately locked inside of this premium board themes. You got to have a subscription. But the point is, I don't think that experience is exclusive to children. I mean, if you look at just art in general and aesthetics and how we build things and what adults care about, I think that aesthetics actually might become more important as people get older. And again, this isn't just about aesthetics. I'm talking about the whole package, all of those 11 details wrapped together, representing the authentic online Xiangqi culture. Okay, so that was a lot of picking on Xiangqi.com. Again, Xiangqi.com has all the features that you need. I think if you're interested in the game mechanics, that this is absolutely the number one place for you to start. But the reason I've spent so much time of this video picking on Xiangqi.com specifically is, one, I think this is one of the most egregious examples of cultural sterilization that you can possibly find in a lot of the main Xiangqi world. But the other reason is because I feel like Xiangqi.com has the best chance at being the number one Xiangqi site. Maybe not supplanting Tiantian Xiangqi or something like that, because the Chinese ecosystem is pretty well protected from some of the competition. But I really do think that they have the best chance at being the absolute best. They've got the Xiangqi.com domain. They've already got a player base. They have the entire system in place for all of the chess analysis that you could possibly need. I mean, they're missing maybe a few features like the opening database and things like that. But I think they're well poised if they make the right strategic steps to presenting a more authentic expression of Xiangqi. I think they're well poised to be an absolutely fantastic place to play Xiangqi, and that I would unabashedly and with no hesitation recommend to anybody. But I do think that they need to evaluate their strategy. I think they need to look at their target audience and whether the people that are currently on the site are mostly just the people interested in the game mechanics. And if they're missing out on a huge segment of opportunity of people who are interested more in the overall experience, which you're not going to get from Xiangqi.com. So as promised, here's my final recommendation. You want to know what is the best place to play Xiangqi? Again, it goes back to the three categories that we talked about. If you're willing to get a WeChat account and play apps from mainland China, then that's going to be the most authentic place that you can possibly pursue Xiangqi. But it has a lot of friction and barriers, and maybe you're not interested in dealing with that. So here's my recommendation if you don't want to deal with all of that. I would encourage you to put up with the language barrier and use the Chinese chess app from HDuo Fun, which you can find on the Google Play Store and the Apple App Store. This is going to be one of the easiest ways for you to experience the authentic expression of Xiangqi. This has almost every single one of the elements of Xiangqi culture that I laid out. And to be honest, this has got to be one of the most beautiful and gorgeous interfaces and front pages on any of the apps. I just absolutely love this. And if you're brand new to Xiangqi, one of the downsides of this app that Xiangqi.com can offer is there are no international symbol editions. You're going to have to deal with the fact that all of the Chinese characters are on the pieces. Xiangqi.com has a very nice feature which allows you to use international symbols. But I promise you that if you just use the Chinese characters, you're going to pick them up much faster than you probably think. And I would just say, go for it. Jump right in. Get that authentic experience. You're going to be paired with real players. Now, if as you're studying Xiangqi, you're maybe a little frustrated with some of the learning materials or some of the analysis features in this app. Like I said, it has all of the pieces that are in Tiantian Xiangqi, but it doesn't have as much, nearly as much. So that's where Xiangqi.com really shines. Again, like I said, Xiangqi.com is feature heavy. That is their focus. They've modeled themselves after chess.com, which is obviously a world-class system. So you're going to get a much better analysis system, a much more usable research and academic interface in Xiangqi.com for studying Xiangqi. So really the final recommendation is kind of a pair of apps or a sequence of apps. Maybe you start with this Chinese chess app and then you move to using Xiangqi.com more frequently, and then maybe eventually you decide to just jump in and start using the WeChat apps. But those are the main options for you to consider, and hopefully this video was helpful for you. I really do hope that Xiangqi.com can think a little bit about their strategy, because I would love to see them orient themselves a little more towards the Chinese culture, because I would love for that to be the main recommendation always, without exception, because it's so good on the feature side. So I'll drop links below to these apps, and if you think there are some that rival these, or maybe I missed something entirely and there's a completely better option, drop a comment below so others can learn about it. We'll see you next time.